Okay, so in our last session, what we covered is we introduced ourselves to UML, what is UML, and we essentially saw three kinds of UML diagram. That is the use case diagram, wherein we understood it describes what part of the system, what about the system. Then we saw the class diagram, wherein it talked about the how part of the system. Primarily a detailed version of the implementation, wherein we have the classes and objects. Then we saw the package diagram at a very high level, wherein we saw how the system looks like at a very higher level in the form of directories, subdirectories, and so on. Now, before starting with today's session, the rest six types of UML diagram, we'll just do a quick revision of what we have covered, the important aspects. So the very first aspect that we covered in our last session was the association versus composition and what is aggregation. Now, association is like when you are associating a class with another class, how you are defining an association. Can anyone give me an example of a kind of association that we covered? In which diagram we covered the association? Pretty much in every diagram, right? In use case diagram, we associated one use case with another use case, or a use case with an actor. In class diagram, we associated one class with another class. So association is a common relationship in UML which can be triggered or which can be used in any kind of diagram that you are dealing with out of the 9 diagrams that we saw in UML. Then comes your aggregation and then comes your composition. Again, it is applied at a class level wherein we try to aggregate a relationship and compose a particular relationship. So these three types that you see over here are called as UML relationships: association, aggregation, and composition. So this is a very important concepts when you are dealing with your UML diagrams. Now, these are some of the examples, like your owner feeds the pets. Pet please your owners is an example of association. A tail is part of both dogs and cat. This is an example of aggregation or composition. Or a cat is a kind of pet. This is an example of inheritance or generalization. So aggregation or composition, they means the same thing. Inheritance or generalization, they means the same thing. So if you see some of the example over here, a single student can associate with multiple teachers, like we saw in our last session. We denoted by one dot dot star. The example indicates that every instructor has one or more students. So again, we denote this one or more with one dot dot star. So these are nothing but your symbols that you use when you define the multiplicity in your UML diagram, irrespective of whether it's an association relationship or composition or generalization or any other relationship that might exist in UML framework. You would define the multiplicity in this particular format. Now, these are some of the example of your association and uh, uh, composition. So, a person would be having a head, hand, and leg, without which the person won't exist. So, for instance, in a system context, if I delete a head, it doesn't affect that person class. But if I delete a person, then it ultimately what I would say deletes all these three items as well, because if I delete the main object, there is no point of having the sub object. However, the system won't allow you to do so. You cannot delete person until and unless you delete the head, hands, and legs. If you conceptualize it from a system perspective, you have to first delete the child object and then you have to delete the parent object. You cannot delete the parent object and then keep on deleting the child object. So that is a, I mean, this is a necessity that system enforces for you. You cannot do so. But if in case you delete it, then it would stand ineligible. Now coming to the other part, wherein you have a car which comprises of engine and wheel. Now if you are doing an engine inspection, then also you would be needing an engine object. So the object is same, but the parent can be different. So engine can serve for engine inspection class as well and for car class as well. So the child objects are same, but the parent can be different. So in this case, if you delete a particular parent, it won't affect this object. But if you delete this particular object, then it would definitely impact the parent because that object doesn't exist. So in system context also, the rules are what I would say defined in this particular context itself. Now there is something called as specialization as well. So specialization is the reverse process of generalization. Now what is generalization? Generalization is the other word for your inheritance. Now if you are doing an inheritance, you are having a bank account, the main account, and then you are having a savings account, credit card account, or loan account. So generalization is like you are mapping this child account to your parent bank account. And specialization is the reverse process of generalization, wherein you create the bank account first, then go on adding the other types of account under that particular bank account, savings, credits, loan, and so on. Now we'll start with sequence diagram, the fourth type of diagram in UML. Now sequence diagram is like they are more of an interactive diagram. Interactive diagram, for example, if a particular process you consider, like we saw an HRMS process wherein we had steps of 15 to 16 process, what I would say, sub processes within that single processes. Now, all the processes won't be executed at a time. It would take some time and then the next process would get executed. Now, how do we depict those sequence of processes? Now, those sequence of processes are ensured to be documented with the help of sequence diagram. Whenever you are given a particular process to design in a particular software system and that process has different steps under it, you have to use sequence diagram because that is the only ideal option that you have when you are defining a sequence of interaction within a particular system, because there would be lot many things that would go to and fro and they won't happen all at same time. There is a certain time frame associated with it, there is a certain time window associated to it, so you have to keep track of that timing aspect as well in this particular diagram. So that's the reason why it is called a sequence diagram. One sequence executed, then after 5 minutes or 10 minutes the next sequence would execute in that particular um, set of processes, then the next step would execute, and if there is a back and forth between the step, then also a timing would be associated and that thing would happen within that particular time frame window. Now here essentially messages are given more emphasis because when you are defining the interaction between the objects, so it is essentially a kind of interaction diagram. So when you are interacting essentially between the objects within a particular system, now this objects could be your modules within a particular system. If you consider the insurance domain, the policy module, billing module, or claims module, or reporting module, so they are treated as objects. Now, how these objects would be interacting with each other? For example, I issued a policy, a message would be sent to the billing module. Now, billing module would confirm the payment by sending messages to the payment gateway. Now, payment gateway would confirm the payment has been successfully authorized by sending a message to the billing system. Then billing system would send a message to the policy system saying that the payment has been processed. Now you could send the physical copy of the document to the insurer. So this way, the objects would interact with each other with the help of messages. Now these messages would be in system format. System format as in it could be in your JSON format or XML format, or it could be in any XYZ format depending on the technical constraint that you have enforced in a particular project. Now, we as a business analyst need not to worry about what format the messages go and how the technical architecture has been designed around sending and receiving of those messages, but what we are more concerned about, a message should get triggered after a particular process. After a particular process has triggered an event. Now, whenever an event occur, a message would be triggered. Now, this message could be a inward message as well as outward message. It depends on the event that the object triggered in that particular sequence. If we see, these are some of the elements in a sequence diagram. We have the regular actor, which is nothing but your user. Then we have the object. It could be a student object, instructor object. If you are dealing with any specialized domain like your banking, insurance, these objects are essentially termed as the business objects over there, wherein I gave you an example, like you would be having agent object or underwriter object or your broker object, depending on what the context of the system and domain of the work is. Then you have a unit, which would represent a subsystem. Now, units are nothing but your modules, your policy module or billing module. So here an object can also send a message and unit can also send a message. It depends who is sending that particular, who is actually responsible for triggering that event which causes the message to be initiated. Then comes the separator. Separator is an interface or boundary between the subsystem or components or different modules within a particular system. And then we have group. If in case we want to group a particular system, for example, I am developing a system for issuing a policy, and that system is exclusive to agents only. So here the group would be object 1. Object 1 would be my agents, and unit would be the policy issuance system or the policy administration system. So this way I can group it. Now for payment, I would be having the billing team and the payment system. Similarly, for claims, I would be having the claims inspector and the claims processing system. This way, I can group the unit and object depending on their behavior and the nature of work they do in actual system. Then we have message. So these are the symbol for messages. Then we have synchronous message and asynchronous message. Now, can anyone tell me what's the difference between synchronous message and asynchronous message? Any thoughts, any random thoughts that may come into your mind?
uh, the synchronous uh, that the client waits for the server to respond to that message.
Okay. Okay, let me give you an example. You are trying to log in into a banking system using a one-time authentication password. So is it an example of synchronous message or asynchronous message? An OTP is being received on your cell phone. Until and unless you don't punch in that particular OTP into the internet banking portal, you won't be able to log in into your banking application. Is it an example of synchronous or asynchronous?
It's synchronous.
Absolutely. So synchronous is where, like, you initiate an event. Now this event can be initiated by your system itself. Now if we consider that OTP example, now in that particular example, you are trying to log in into your banking system. Now the banking server initiate a message, and message which sends to the third party SMS provider gateway. Third party SMS provider gateway could be anyone. For example, MSG91. It's a gateway which is used by some of the banking clients. So they would initiate a request to MSG91, who is the third party provider for sending messages and validating it with the banking system for user authentication. Now, MSG91 would check for your registered mobile number with the banking system, and they would send a one-time authentication password. Now, once you enter that particular message into the banking system would re-authenticate it with the MSG91 server, whether the OTP that you have entered is same that the MSG91 system has sent to your cell phone. Only after the authentication has happened, then only you are allowed to log in into that particular banking application. Now, why there is an expiration time set for it? Any idea? For synchronous messages, why there is a expiration time set? Because this OTP typically has an expiration time ranging between 2 minutes to 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Yes, absolutely. So here what happens essentially is, in the case of synchronous messages, we tend to signify the wait time because the message has to be acknowledged as in we are expecting a response from that particular message. It's not like just for the sake of sending and just for the sake of receiving we are doing the communication. We are in the mid of a particular process. Until and unless we don't have that interaction or have that sequence complete, we cannot move with the next process. For example, in our internet banking application, until and unless I don't punch in the correct OTP that has been sent to my cell phone, I cannot proceed with my login process. So there is a wait time associated with it, and I have to acknowledge as a user that I have the authority to that particular bank account, or I am the authorized person of that particular bank account. So that's the reason why we need to have that validation checkpoint wherein we acknowledge that particular message by giving the correct OTP over here. Now, coming to the asynchronous message do not have any such criterion associated to it, because asynchronous message are something wherein a response is not expected immediately. It can wait for a certain period of time. For example, your emails. Emails are a good example of asynchronous messages, wherein an email is sent and there is no wait time associated with that particular email when that particular message would be read and replied, and so on. Then comes creating a message and destroying a message. Whenever you are designing a sequence diagram, you need to put special emphasis on how the messages are created, at what event, what triggering event the messages are created, and once the message has been acknowledged or an confirmation is received appropriately, the messages are destroyed. Now, why this messages needs to be destroyed? Because it shouldn't choke up the memory or the bandwidth of that particular system if it's an online application. So that's the reason why we would like to destroy these messages. Or in some cases, if an acknowledgement is not received, then we cannot create that message for a longer time. In case of this OTPs, after the 20 minutes expiration time frame is exhausted, the message is no more valid and the message is destroyed. A response is not received, a message is not acknowledged. Now it's the time to destroy that particular message. So that's the reason why we have to put special emphasis on destroying the messages as well. Then comes action. Action is an event wherein these messages would get triggered on whatsoever event that it is triggering. Then comes the page break. If there is any need, then you can use it. If there are any conditions or loop that you need to put in place, then you can use these particular symbols over here. Then there are return messages symbol as well. If you want to add some additional notes, we have free note. Then flow note, if you want to write something inline, describe the units or objects inline, then you can use this as a your helping hand. Then if there are any links that you would like to include in your sequence diagram, then you can include that as well. Now we'll see a sequence diagram. Now in this sequence diagram, these boxes, the green boxes that you see, they are nothing but our objects. So Fred is an object who is patron. Bob is an object who is a waiter. Hank is an object who is a cook. And Remy is an object who is a cashier. Now let's go sequence by sequence. Now first sequence is starting with ordering food. So Fred, who is visiting that particular restaurant, he is a patron and he is ordering food. Now whom he is placing the order with? With Bob. Now Bob is the waiter who is taking his order. Now after taking this order from Fred, what Bob is doing, he is giving the order to Cook. So Cook is taking that particular order. Okay. Now meanwhile he is placing the order with Cook. He is asking or he is serving wine to Fred, that is, who is the patron, who has arrived as a guest. Now, meanwhile, he is consuming that particular wine served by Bob waiter, the food is ready. After the food is ready, Hank asks Bob the waiter to pick up that order. After he picks up that particular order, he serves the food to whom? The patron, Fred. After the wait time has exhausted, he consumes that particular food or wine, whatever is served to him. It's time for making a payment. So he initiates the payment. Now whom he need to do the payment? To the cashier, which is Ren. Now here you could see everything happens in a particular sequence. So ordering food is one sequence, then ordering food from waiter to cook is another sequence. But in order to happen or complete this particular sequence, there is a wait time. Now in that wait time, we are filling that particular wait time by any other parallel activity. Meanwhile, the food is ready. Why don't you have a glass of wine? So that is what exactly happening over here. They are ordering food, food is being prepared, picked up, serving the food, then the payment happens, and the empty time or the wait time which is there, they are filling up with consuming or serving wine. We may choose to use it, we may choose to completely eliminate it. It depends on our requirement. If we are having some parallel activity to be done within that particular wait period time, then we would include it, else we can completely acknowledge to skip this particular part. Let us see another example. Now here you could see a bigger case study, registration for a class. Now here we are having an actor, student, then we are having a UI browser, any Google Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox, whichever the browser it is. Then we are having an internet. Now what is internet over here? Internet is nothing but a medium of communication. It is essentially your internet service provider. It could be any internet service provider. Only with the help of internet you would be able to communicate to the web server. So that's the reason why we are showing here internet. Now here we have grouped some of the objects and the units. So web server is a unit, registration page is an object, student is an object, and course is an object. And then we have one more unit called as database. Now what is unit over here? Unit are nothing but your systems component. So UI browser is a system component, web server is a system component, so they are called as unit. Database is a system component, that is a unit. Even registration page can be considered as system component, that is a unit. Whereas student and course are your objects, and this student is your actual actor who would be performing operations. So clear up till here? What are the notation? Student is an actor, UI browser is a unit, web server is a unit, registration page is a unit, student is an object, course is an object, and database is an unit. Unit are nothing but your system component. And here we have grouped the web server using grouping, considering all the similar elements: web server, registration page, student, and course. Now, after we have done all the necessary initial prerequisites, grouping the units and the objects, the components, the actors, now it's time to design our sequence. Now, every unit and object would be depicted with a line. So this is nothing but your timeline. So this is your student timeline. This is your UI browser timeline. This is your it doesn't matter, this particular timeline. It's just a medium of communication between your UI browser and your web server. So you can depict it in a similar way like you have done it over here. Then you have a web server timeline. Then you have a registration page timeline. Then student object timeline, course object timeline, and your database unit timeline. After you have designed these all things, now it's time to number your sequence. So you could see some numbers over here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you have to number your sequence depending on how many interaction would happen in that particular given context. Now these are your inline comments. The student browsed to the automated registration system homepage. These are your inline comments. Now your actual event starts from here. Now student browses to the home page using the UI browser. After that, when the student browses for the home page, a request is being made to the web server. Whenever you type in a URL into an internet application, your UI browser, it requests to the web server of that particular application's web hosting company, wherein the UI browser, it requests for a copy of your home page. For example, if you are browsing any ABC site, it would first request to the web server of that particular ABC site to render a copy of that particular web server into your browser. So this is what it is happening over here. Now after it hits the web server sends a response. Now in response, what is included? Nothing but your home page copy, which is visible by the student who is an actor. After that, the student clicks on the registration link in the home page. Now whenever this response is sent by the web server on the UI browser of the student sees a registration link over here. So he selects the registration page. Now that registration page goes to the web server, like in case of home page. So that request goes over it. Now what web server does next is it first checks if the student is logged in or not. Now if the student is not logged in, it asks for user to log in. So user logs in over there. A prompt actually happens over here when he intends to register for it. Now once the user is logged in, the web server renders a new registration page. It prepares for all the initial details, the student details, the demographic details, and so on. After that, it prepares for rendering that particular web page. After that, a new student is requested. So new student as in a student object is created. Some methods are called like getting registration info, getting student ID, and so on. After that, a written information is passed on, wherein a returning of all this information happens. So what essentially happens over here, it first checks if the student is logged in. The web server checks and they see yes, the student is logged in. If it is not logged in, it asks the student to log in. Once that is happened, a new page is created. Now what is the meaning of new page being created? Now in software programming world, whenever you want to create a particular this thing a particular page is loaded in your particular website, it's not the for a regular user it's a regular page, but behind the scene what is happening, it's creating an object of the page class, the entire page class. So that is what it is depicting over here. A new page object is created. After that, it is preparing that particular page. Now, whatever information that comes preloaded into that particular page, it needs to be first prepared before it loads up for you. For example, your user details, your registration detail, or your student ID details. All those information needs to be prepared. Now, in order to prepare those information, it all needs to be initialized with its respective objects. For example, your student ID would come from your student class. Your course ID would come from your course class. And all the relevant information would come from their relevant classes. Like we saw in our last session, we have different classes. Now, essentially what happening over here is it's initializing objects for those classes. After it has initialized all the objects, the final populated web page containing all the student demographic information is returned back to the registration page. After that registration page is pre-filled with all the information after the user has logged in, it is returned to the web server, and the web server returns that particular response to the UI web browser. So if you consider it from a programmatic perspective, this use case suffice that particular set of information, like what the student class, at what particular event the student class would be initialized, at what particular event the get registration information method would be called, or at what particular event the registration of the student ID parameter would be sent to the student registration method, and the data is returned. So you have to sit with the development team when you are designing the sequence diagram and ask them what are the important methods or objects that needs to be created when you are designing a particular sequence diagram. So as a business analyst, you won't design the sequence diagram in isolation. You have to always sit with a developer person, and you have to get these inputs like the method information, the object information, and the proper message passing mechanism. What would be the input and what would be the output? Only after that you should be able to get a final version of your sequence diagram. Now, who are the essential consumer of the sequence diagram? Is it the business stakeholder or business sponsor? No. Business stakeholder or business sponsors are not the consumers of sequence diagram. Sequence diagrams consumers are your technical architects, your solution architects, your development team, and so on. Now coming to the testing part, now this is something that won't be tested by the regular QA. This is something that needs to be tested by the development team itself with the help of unit testing. QA cannot validate all these things. Prepare is getting initialized or not, whether an object is being created or not, whether duplicate objects are being created or not, or whether there are no objects created at all. So a developer would be the best person who would test out this particular sequence diagram. The QA team cannot test this particular sequence diagram. So in sequence diagram, what we are trying to achieve is give a detailed description of the particular events or sequences that are happening within the system that are under analysis at that point of time. So that is our agenda for sequence diagram. Now if we see another sequence diagram, this is example 3. We have an user interface, then we have an object of hotel chain, and then we have the main parent, different hotels over here. So we do a make reservation event. After making a reservation, it goes to that particular hotel chain. The hotel chain checks which particular hotel is having that particular availability. After that, it makes a reservation and gives a notice of confirmation. And these are some of the timelines that we have associated with it. So there are some conditions associated with it. If room is available, then you make a reservation, else don't make a reservation. You can also create a sequence diagram with this particular fashion. So these are three types of sequence diagram that we saw in different conditions and situations. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Now, when it comes to the usage part of sequence diagram, so you would essentially use sequence diagram wherein there are complex interaction between the components. Like I already explained you, whenever there are multiple components associated with a particular system, like the database, the web server, the web UI, or the different modules, in those cases only you would be using sequence diagram. Now, these are something that are developed in parallel by different teams. It supports robust interface covering multiple scenarios. So what we are actually uncovering through sequence diagram is not the programming aspect of a particular system, but the technical scenarios within a particular system. Then comes the other use case elaboration. If we want to elaborate our use case level deeper, then also we can use sequence diagram. Now, use case always talks about what. If we want to elaborate that what to how, then we would be using sequence diagram. One way of elaborating what to how is your class diagram. The other way is your sequence diagram. Now, as a business analyst, you may not or you may create sequence diagram, but you should know how to read a sequence diagram. So it's conditional whether you would be creating a sequence diagram or not. It's completely depends on the nature of the project you would be getting, but you should know how to read a sequence diagram. The reason being, if there is an impact analysis report that you need to create, and if there are some technical challenges in place, and you are substituted by some of the sequence diagramming documents, then you should be in a good position to read and understand that sequence diagram document. So that was the fourth type of diagram in UML. Now comes the fifth type of diagram, that is collaboration diagram. Now what is there in collaboration diagram? So again, it's a type of interaction diagram like the sequence diagram. So it collaborates the static and dynamic relationship. It focuses on object roles rather than timing. So in sequence diagram, we had a special emphasis on timing. So we had a sequence, we had a timeline, and we planned the timelines as per the sequence. Like first sequence would happen, then only the second sequence in that particular timeline would happen. Then the third sequence, then the fourth sequence, and so on. The numbering 1 to 15 or 16 which we saw, that was essentially denoting the timing part. But here in collaboration diagram, although it's an interaction diagram, but here the focus is on object roles, not the timing. So each message in collaboration diagram has a sequence number. So collaboration diagram is used to describe a specific scenario by depicting the movement of messages between the objects. For example, show a spatial organization of objects and their interaction rather than sequence of the interaction. So if you could see over here, we have a user interface, the same example that we just saw in our sequence diagram. We have a window user interface, then we have a chain of hotel, and then we have a hotel objects, and then if the reservation is done, then we would send a confirmation notice. Now if you see over here, a message is being sent, make reservation, through a web user interface. Web user interface is any web browser, Google Chrome, Firefox, Mozilla, and let's say the hotel chain is your Marriott Hotel. Now you are logging into Marriott Hotel's website and you are placing a reservation request. Now that Marriott Hotel website is first sending that particular message to the hotel chain web server, the main hotel chain. Now that main hotel chain web server is what they are doing. They are checking with their individual hotels which are located in different areas with that particular city or in that particular state. and they check if a room is available. If it is available, then they make a reservation. If it is, if the a reservation is completed, then a confirmation notice is sent to whichever or whoever the user who has initiated that particular reservation. Now, in between this particular process, while they are going through with different hotels located in that particular city, they do a looping over here. For each day, is room available? Now, is room available is a very what I would say ambiguous term, wherein it just check is room available or not. What if the reservation is for more than one day? In that case, they would run a for each loop in the particular system, and they would check if room is available for the entire booking time period. For example, if a person is booking that particular hotel for 7 days, is the entire 7 days the room is available? If yes, then only they would go about making a reservation. So that's the self link they have established. Now here, if you see the numbering over here, 1.1, 1.1.1, 1.1.1.2, 1.1.1.1, and 1.1.1.2.1. These are nothing but your collaboration steps denotion, wherein you are indicating the sequence with the help of this denotion. Now 1.1 is your main process, step 1. Now 1.1.1 is your next step. Now this 1.1.2 is the sub-step of make reservation, and similarly 1.1.1 is the sub-step of make reservation. After that, this is the last step, that is 1.1.2.1. So here we are not giving more emphasis on the timing part, rather the sequencing part, like in the context of your objects, from one object to another object, how the sequencing happens from an object perspective, the methods, make reservation and all those things, not the timing part. Now this is how we compare a sequence diagram with a collaboration diagram. Now this is a sequence diagram example, and this is an your regular collaboration diagram example. Same example is there, but depicted in two different formats. First, we'll see how it looks like in a sequence diagram. So here we have a member as an actor, then we have UI, then we have the member database, then we have the book database, and then we have a copy kind of functionality. First, a member comes to a particular library system and he reserves a copy. After that, that particular request goes to goes through a particular UI wherein they accept the request detail for reserving a copy of a particular book. Now before reserving that particular request for reserving a copy of that particular book, we need to first validate whether this particular member is a genuine member or not. After that, only we should be able to proceed with the reservation formalities. Now that request comes from the UI screen to the member database. After that, the authentication has been processed, the parallel activities starts. For example, checking the availability of that particular copy he is intending to reserve. Meanwhile, the reservation has completed, the membership validation has completed, and a reservation of that particular book is what I would say is placed. After that, there is something called as statuses. Now what is statuses? Statuses is like in a particular library management system, there are different statuses associated with a particular book. For example, release or reserve or due, depending on the situation of that particular subscriber's activity that is taking place in and around for that particular book. For example, if he places a request for reserving a book, the status would be R or depending on how the system signifies it. If the subscriber has overdue a particular time period for a book's reservation, the status would change to overdue. If the subscriber has returned the particular book, the status would change to returned. So this way, there are different statuses associated with every book that belongs to a particular member within that particular library management system. Now here in this case, after the book has been reserved, the status is changed to R. After that, it sets an alert upon returning of the first due copy. So whatever the alert would be there, depending on the time period, for example 15 days or 20 days, after before that particular time period, whatever the business rule would be there, that let's say within 15 days you have to return a book, prior to your end date, 3 days prior to your end date, you would be given an alert message. So that is what being set over here. After all this information has been received over here, an information request is sent to the member after reservation has happened, and after that the book has been issued to that particular member. Depending on the time window, an overdue notice is being sent appropriately to that particular member. So this is the process that happens after the book has been issued. So this way you could see there is a timeline associated with it. There is a set of events that are happening, and after that particular event, final overdue notice is being sent. So in this process, everything is associated with a timeline. There are parallel process, of course, but they all happen in a particular sequence. Now what happens in case of collaboration diagram? So in collaboration diagram, we do not have special emphasis on what I would say timing. Rather, we have special emphasis on the steps and the objects. So we have UI at the center, we have the member requesting for that particular book, then we have the member database wherein the membership validation happens, and all the books availability is checked in the particular book object over here, and then all the information is being uh, feeded into the system with this copy thing, wherein we check the status, change the status, set alert on first due copy. Here there is no sequence, rather we put special emphasis on the steps and the objects that would be triggering these steps. So that's the difference between your sequence diagram and collaboration diagram. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Now moving on to the sixth kind of diagram, that is our state chart diagram. Now what is state chart diagram? So here we have different states associated with the objects basis on their behavior. So it shows the possible states of an object and their transition that causes a change in the state. For example, logging in can be factored in 4 non-overlapping states. When you log in into a system, it can have 4 different states: getting social security number, getting PIN, validating, and rejecting. From each state comes a complete set of transition. Now if you consider an example of banking system, it consists of a validation of social security number, then your personal ID number, then submitting the information for validation. So essentially, this login process has to go through various states in terms of validating your credential. To give you a much simplified example, when you place a particular order on your e-commerce website, the order status keeps on changing, like order placed, order packed, order shipped, then order completed, order delivered. So order is an object, whereas the state are order placed, order packed, order shipped. So what it is happening? It's transitioning the state as and when you are progressing through that particular process. So order to delivery is a process, but within that order to delivery process, your order objects are changing their states from taking the order to delivering a final physical copy of that particular order to your respective residences. Now, this is a diagram that you are going to use extensively in your business analysis activities, because this is very crucial, piece of artifact that you need to create when you are working as a business analyst when it comes to a state chart diagram, because essentially, more or less, all the objects would have to go through a specific state. If I had to give you an example from my insurance domain perspective, then an insurance policy has to go through different states, like a particular quotation has been received. After that, a policy has been issued. After that, a policy has been renewed. After that, an endorsement has been done. So issue, quote, endorsement, renew, these are nothing but the states that my insurance policy object goes through within a particular insurance life cycle. So every domain object would be having a certain life cycle associated to it. If you consider a mutual fund, so mutual fund is also having a life cycle associated to it, through which it transition its states, the mutual fund object. If you consider a simple security that is being traded on your stock market, that is also having a life cycle associated to it, from the day it started trading till the day it is getting out of the market. So every object would be having a state. Now they are shown in rounded rectangles. Transitions are in arrow from one state to another. Events or condition that triggers transition are written beside the arrows. These are some of the guidelines how you would be creating your state chart diagram. And uses is like the life history of a given class, use cases, operation, the event that causes a transition from one state to another, the action that results from a state change, and so on. So this is an example of your state chart diagram. So this is an dial tone case study wherein you use a vanilla phone that was used in earlier times, a decade ago, how their state chart diagram looks like. Now here, if you consider a old phone, it was always in idle condition. When you lift that particular phone, you get a dial tone, a tone wherein a temporary tone that you hear when you lift the receiver of that particular phone. After that, you have received, lifted that receiver, it goes to an active state. Now, within that active state, what are the things that are happening? That is something we are going to see over here. Now, here the dial tone play thing happens. After 15 seconds, if there is no activity recorded, then it would time out automatically and it would play a message that you have not dialed in any number and so on, and it would automatically replay that dialer tone. Now, if in case you are dialing a particular number, it would check whether the number of digits you have entered, are they valid or invalid. So depending on the country code and the number of digits in a mobile number or landline number, whatever digits you enter, it first checks whether it's valid or invalid. After that, it if it is invalid, then it would play a message for you that it is an invalid number. Now, something that is worth consideration over here, every event transition or every object transition over here is given a time frame associated to it. You lift the dialer tone and you don't dial anything, within 15 seconds it would time out. You lift a dialer tone and you enter a number, the validation takes place within 15 seconds and it would again time out. Now, if it is an invalid number, the message would play only after 15 seconds, after the validation has been actually done. After that, if the number is valid, it would connect to you with that particular number. Now, connection doesn't mean that the person has received your phone call. If the person is busy, you would receive a busy tone. If he is connected, then his phone would ring and you would hear a ringtone or playtone that he is having. After that, once he answers the phone, he starts talking to you, it would be pinned. Pinned as in what's the billing that would be billed to you. For example, if you spoke for 1 minute 20 seconds, you would be billed depending on that particular time frame or that particular time period. After all this conversation has done, the caller hangs up and the connection is disconnected. So this is an example of state chart diagram of our vanilla uh, phone system that was there in place 2 decades ago, possibly in the 1990s or 2000 and early 2000. We used the landline phones at our home. So at that point of time, this is the state chart diagram that depicts that particular scenario. In system context, I gave you that order management system example, the insurance example. That way you can depict a state chart diagram. Now this is the seventh diagram, that is your activity diagram in your UML. Now activity diagram is essentially a flowchart diagram. So activity diagram and state chart diagram are related to each other. So state chart diagram focuses attention on object undergoing a process or a process as an object, whereas activity diagram focuses on the flow of activities involved in a single process. So here if we see, here we are focused about the objects within a particular process like dial tone, timeout, invalid, dialing, connecting. These are nothing but your objects within a particular dial tone process. Now, in activity diagram, we would focus on the activities involved in a single process. Before that, some of the elements in the activity diagram, the initial activity is done by this dark circle, activity is denoted by this rectangle, decisions are denoted by this diamond symbol, final activity is denoted by this rectangle, circle with a dot. Then there are signals, output signal and input signal. Concurrent activities, if there are any concurrent activities or parallel activities happening, then we would denote it with this particular symbol. Now this is an example of activity diagram of an ATM machine. So these are our swim lanes, customer swim lane, ATM machine swim lane and bank swim lane. So here we start our activity diagram. We first insert the card, then we enter the particular PIN. After entering the PIN, it goes to the banking server wherein it authorizes whether the PIN and the ATM card inserted is valid or not. If it is a valid PIN, then we are prompted for entering the amount. Now after we have entered the amount, we go for checking our account balance. Now in that particular account, the banking system checks the account balance when we enter the amount. After the amount has been entered, the banking system checks whether it has sufficient balance or not. If it has sufficient balance, it goes to the, sends a message to the ATM server and you are able to take out money from that particular bank. This is the happy part. Now what about the unhappy part? Now during your authorization, if you are not entering a valid PIN, it would directly go to your ATM machine and it would eject the card and you would get the card outside of your ATM machine, coming out of your ATM machine. Now what if the balance is not sufficient? If the balance is not sufficient, it would go to your ATM screen and it would show you the balance, that this is the balance. You cannot enter amount greater than your actual balance maintained in your banking system, and it would eject the card and your card would be taken out. So here the process is your ATM machine, wherein we are emphasizing more on the activity part rather than object. So these are the activities: insert card, enter PIN, enter amount, debit account, take money from slot, show balance, eject card, take card. These are nothing but your activity. These are not something that deals with the objects. So objects here are customer, ATM machine and bank. These can be considered as objects, but we are describing the activities that are associated with this particular object. So that's the difference between state chart diagram and activity diagram. So in real life practice, your sequence diagram and collaboration diagram are interrelated. Your state chart diagram and activity diagram are interrelated. So they go in sets. One describing a particular aspect of a typical system, and the other one describing another particular aspect of a typical system. Okay. Any questions, anyone so far? Now, next diagram is our implementation diagram. Now, what is there in implementation diagram? So it shows the aspect of model implementation that includes source code structure and runtime implementation structure. Now, there are two types in implementation diagram, that is your deployment diagram and component diagram. We'll first see the deployment diagram. Now, in deployment diagram, it shows the organization and the dependencies amongst the software components, like your source code components or binary code or executable components, which are being configured in runtime processing and so on. Excuse me. If you see a particular deployment diagram of a library system, we have the first component, library server, and the clients. The typical client would be your librarian and the member. Now, member are a group of people who would be accessing the library server to maintain their membership management, and librarian is the person who is accountable for maintaining the information in the library management system. So they would be using their set of component or their set of modules in their respective web browser, whichever web browser they are logging through. Now, these web browsers are directly connected to your library management system, wherein all the information they would be processing. For example, the client member would be doing their account maintenance, like issuing a particular book, or reserving a particular book, or requesting a particular book, or returning a particular book, if it's an e-library in that context. So it would directly interact with the library system. Librarian in turn would be doing his set of activities, like adding new titles in the librarian system, maintaining the subscription of all other client members, then taking annual charges from them for uh, their annual subscription and so on. Then uh, what I would say, approving the reservation request from the client members coming to him. So essentially, if you see, they are the component level view of the system. They don't detail out the important aspect within that particular system, but they show the component structure of a particular system, how this component would be interacting with different clients. So in our regular example, regular industry, if you consider, we would be having our system hosted on different servers. So there would be a main data center. Within that data center, there would be different data servers located at different regions, different countries. How this information is being passed to which server would process that particular information and send information to what other server. So those high level views are depicted in your deployment diagram, and you would be having some networking protocols associated with it in your deployment diagram for TCP/IP. So this is a networking protocol that shows the connection between the server and the client. So essentially, deployment diagram help us understand a system component from a very high level, how they would be interacting. If they are geographically distributed, their components are geographically distributed, like the physical servers and the virtual system where they are hosted on a cloud environment, or in premises, or out premises, and so on. So these are the typical component of typical notations of a component diagram. For a component, we have this notation. For classes, interface, and objects, we have this notation. And for association, we have the regular notation. So this is the example that we just saw for component diagram, we have a library management system, client librarian, and client member. So that is it. And one thing about the component diagram. So component diagram and package diagram are the same thing that we covered in our last session, the third diagram. They are interchangeably called as component or package diagram. So these were the 9 types of diagram that are part of your UML infrastructure. So you would be using the same Lucid chart for creating a particular uh, diagram. For example, if you want to create a typical, what I would say, UML diagram, here there are different types of diagram. System sequence diagram, if you click on this particular diagram, you would get the the icons that are essentially needed for creating a sequence diagram. Description has expired. I think it's a 14-day trial. Anyways, we'll create in Visio. You are aware about Visio tool, right? Everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll create a sequence diagram over here. So here you could see different types of UML: activity, collaboration, component, deployment, sequence. So whichever thing you feel like, you can click on that particular part, and that necessary what I would say set of icons would be loaded for you. So if we consider this example for a sequence diagram, we need these shapes. So we have this particular object lifeline. You can place it over here by dragging it like this. After you have created this, you can edit the information over there. Before that, the object name over here was patron, waiter, cook, and cashier. This is the patron. This is the waiter. This is the cook. This is the cashier. Now we have defined our object lifeline first. Whichever object we need, the 4 objects. If we want to format it further, we can format it bold. I'll use the format painter. After this has been done, I would increase the timeline over here. and then I'll go about activation. So wherever I want to put, I'll put that activation link. So this is the first activation. After that, there is a parallel activation somewhere from this point to this point. After that, there is one more activation from this point to this point, and then there is one more parallel activation from this point to this point. Then there is an activation from this point till this point, going by this example a little lower. I have done that. First he orders the food, then it is passed on to the cook. So that we will depict with this particular arrow. Okay, now here ensure whenever you are drawing this line, your arrows are always in good shape. Shouldn't be tilted somewhere over here. After that, you add here whatever the activities that you are intending to create here. This is order food. Again, this is order food. Move back to the pointer tool. Meanwhile, the order is being placed. You would serve wine to them. So for that, we would be using a message from sorry, from here to here, but you have to change the arrow direction, which you can do by this line. Meanwhile, the food is being ordered. You would serve wine to them. After that, you would pick up that particular order and serve that food to that waiter, and waiter would take that food to patron. So you need one more activation over here. A message in reverse direction. After he has consumed the food, you would initiate a payment. Now that payment would activate this particular cashier object. So you need one more message over here. and then your sequence completes. So here the same thing again you can do. Now our diagram is ready. After that you can save it in any format you want. So you can save it in PDF format. And this is how this document look like. So if it's in PNG format, you can save it as an PNG format and copy paste this sequence diagram in any of the requirement spec you want, whether it's a BRD or functional specification document, anywhere you want. So this is how you will go about creating that particular diagram. So if you do, sorry, if you don't have Visio, there is a free tool called as Aris Express. It is very much like your Visio tool, but you need to have an open subscription to this particular platform. It would validate your credential, and it has the same features that are part of your Visio, and you can create your UML diagrams within this Aris Express as well. So your assignment for today would be identify the components within your project work and come up with the applicable diagram that you feel like should support your requirement document. Now before we sign off, there is one more thing I wanted to show you in case of use cases. Now this was all about UML part. Now in real scenario, your use cases can also be in textual format. In textual format, if you are writing a use case, it would look like this. Or rather, if you want to describe a particular use case in a textual format, so you won't write 1,000 lines of requirement statement over there. Instead, you would group them in this particular fashion. For example, you would first write the name of the use case, then a brief description about what the use cases does, who are the actors who would be using the use case. In order to start that use case, what are the preconditions, what are the basic flow of that particular use case, the basic steps, then what are the alternate steps if in case the basic step fails, and what are the exception flows if in case the use case is unable to execute. And then there are post condition. Post condition is the final outcome that you are intending to achieve out of that particular use case. So this is also a way of writing the use cases apart from your regular use case. For example, if I want to register a particular user to a particular app, so the description of this use case is about registering a new user to a particular app. Now the actor would be any user based out in India willing to register for that particular app. What should be the precondition when you are registering for a particular app? You should be having a valid Indian phone number, valid email address, and the user should not already be registered because it's registering a new user. So user shouldn't be already registered. Now the app is already installed in your mobile phone. You need to have an active internet connection and your GPS should be turned on. After that, the basic flow is that the user is able to download the app from the Play Store. Once the app is installed and opened, the user has below option. Sign in via this uh, path: Facebook, Google Plus, or email or mobile number. The user should be prompted for turning GPS to capture the exact location of the user. Once authenticated, the app should ask the user for his top 5 categories. So these are the after process that should happen. Once the user this thing happens, all the user management features are enabled for that particular user. So this is the new user sign off the basic sign up. After that, there are certain alternate flows. For example, the user can register for app without turning on GPS. In this case, the user would be asked to enter the location area. If in case this thing doesn't work properly, this is the alternate flow. Now, what is the exception flow in this case? The internet is turned off, or the app is not responding due to improper installation, or the user has entered incorrect mobile number, or the user has entered incorrect email address. So these are the conditions which would contribute towards not a successful registration for a particular user. This, if any of this thing happens, the user won't be registered or onboarded to the system. So those all things would go under exception flow. And post condition is like the user is able to register successfully. Once all the details are validated substantially, the user should be registered successfully, and the user should be able to see the user management module. Now, this was the case when the user is registering via email address and mobile phone number. Now, what if case it's a Facebook sign in or a Google Plus sign in? So for that, we have use case 2 via Facebook and use case 3 via Google. So this is how your use cases are written in real industry, considering any particular application, whether it's a web-based or mobile-based application. This is also a way of documenting your use cases. So I have this document uploaded in that portal. You can have a look. I have already documented some of the use cases. You can go through that as well.